My name is Stephen, and for 10 years I believed I was the architect of a quiet, beautiful life. I thought I knew every corner of my world, the way the floorboards creaked in the hallway, the exact temperature Sonia liked her coffee, and the rhythm of a marriage that felt as solid as the foundation of our home. We weren't a couple that fought in public or chased high-drama thrills. We were the safe ones. We were the couple our friends looked to when their own lives were falling apart. I worked in IT, a world of logic and predictable outcomes. Sonia worked in marketing, a world of presentation and polish. Together, we were a perfect unit. We had a decade of Sunday morning pancakes, Friday night takeout, and a next year that was our favorite topic of conversation. Next year, we'll finally start the nursery. Next year, we'll take that trip to Italy. I didn't realize that while I was planning our future, Sonia was using next year as a shield to keep me from seeing the rot in our now. The end of my life as I knew it didn't come with a grand revelation. It didn't come with a tearful confession or a middle-of-the-night scream. It came because of a law of physics. I dropped my keys. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a day so ordinary it should have been forgotten. I was moving Sonia's car in the driveway, and as I reached for my jacket, my keys slipped and skidded under the passenger seat. I cursed, irritated by the minor inconvenience, and bent down to reach for them. My fingers brushed against something that wasn't carpet and wasn't metal. It was a thin sliver of cold, black glass, a phone, a device that didn't belong to me, didn't belong to her office, and didn't belong in the 10-year history we had written together. Before I even turned it on, the air in the car turned to lead. Before I show you the digital crime scene I found on that screen, the photos and the messages that proved I was married to a stranger, I have to ask you something. If you found a secret phone hidden in your spouse's car, tucked away like a weapon, would you have the strength to put it back and wait for proof, or would you burn the house down that very second? Type "wait" or "burn" in the comments. This is Echoes of Trust and Betrayal. Tonight, we're looking behind the curtain of the perfect marriage. Tell me where you're listening from, and tell me, do you really know what's hiding in the shadows of your own home?
I sat in the driver's seat of Sonia's SUV for what felt like an hour, the engine off, the garage door open, holding the black phone in my hand like a live grenade. My thumb hovered over the power button. I knew that once I pressed it, the Stephen who believed in loyalty and shared futures would cease to exist. I was terrified of what was behind that screen, but I was more terrified of continuing to live in a house made of smoke. I pressed the button. The screen lit up, illuminating the dark interior of the car with a harsh, clinical blue glow. There was no passcode, there was no facial recognition. It just opened, a digital wound, raw and weeping. There were only 4 apps on the home screen: Messages, Photos, WhatsApp, and Signal. It was a burner, a device designed for one thing only: to keep a secret alive. My heart wasn't just pounding, it was a rhythmic thud in my ears that drowned out the sound of the evening crickets. I opened the Messages app first. There was only one conversation thread, no contact name, just a 10-digit number. I scrolled to the very top, my fingers shaking so violently I almost dropped the device. The messages went back 7 months. 7 months of "I love you" texts sent while I was at work. 7 months of "I can't wait to be in your arms" sent while she was sitting on our couch, her feet in my lap. The most recent message had been sent at 2:14 p.m. that afternoon. It read, "The room is booked. Room 304. I'm wearing the red set you like. Hurry." I felt the oxygen leave my lungs. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 5:45 p.m. She had been running late with a client for the last 3 hours. While I was worrying if she'd had a stressful day, she was in room 304, wearing a red set I had never seen. But the messages weren't just about sex. That would have been a sharp, clean pain. This was a dull, grinding agony. They talked about me. They mocked my predictability. Marcus, that was the name that kept appearing in the threads, would ask, "Is the boar home yet?" And Sonia would reply, "No, he's at the gym. He's so easy to manage. He thinks I'm the most loyal woman on earth. It's almost sad." I sat there in the silence, reading the word sad over and over again. My 10 years of devotion, my unwavering support when her father died, the way I had worked double shift so she could pursue her marketing dreams. It was all sad to her. I wasn't her partner. I was a safety net she used while she practiced her high wire act with another man. I realized then that the woman I had kissed goodbye that morning didn't exist. She was a character played by a master of deception, and I was the only person in the audience who didn't know the play was a farce.
If the messages were the evidence of her intent, the Photos app was the evidence of her execution. I tapped the icon, and the screen filled with a grid of images that turned my stomach. These weren't the safe photos we had on our shared cloud, the ones of our dog, our kitchen renovation, or our vacations. These were the photos of a woman I didn't recognize. I saw Sonia in hotel bathrooms, her hair done in a style she never wore for me, posing in mirrors with a predatory, confident smile. She looked younger. She looked dangerous. She looked happy. I saw photos of Marcus, a man I had once considered a casual friend. He was a co-worker of hers, a guy who had been to our house for a barbecue last summer. I remembered shaking his hand. I remembered him looking me in the eye and telling me I was a lucky man. I scrolled further and found a video. I hit play, the volume low, the sound of her laughter filling the small space of the car like a haunting. The video was taken at a high-end restaurant 2 towns over, a place I had always wanted to take her, but she had always claimed was too expensive. The camera panned from a bottle of vintage wine to Marcus, who was leaning across the table, holding her hand. "To us," he whispered. Sonia's voice came from behind the camera, thick with an affection she hadn't shown me in years. "To our real life. I wish we never had to go back to the gray world." The gray world. That was us. That was our home, our marriage, our history. To her, our life was a dull, colorless obligation, and Marcus was the light. The timestamps on the photos were a roadmap of her lies. There were photos from the week she told me she was at a marketing retreat in Chicago, except the background was clearly a beach in Florida. There were photos from the night she said she was staying late to finish the quarter-end report, except the timestamp showed she was in a candle-lit bedroom at 11 p.m. Every time I had felt a flicker of intuition, every time I had wondered why she was suddenly so protective of her official phone, she had gaslit me into believing I was the problem. She had made me feel like an insecure, weird husband for noticing the very things she was flaunting in my face. I realized then that the betrayal wasn't just in the sex or the hidden phone. It was in the way she had stolen my reality. She had let me live in a lie for 7 months, watching me build a future on a foundation she was actively burning down.
I didn't confront her that night. My hand was on the door handle of the SUV, ready to fly out, storm into the kitchen, and scream until my lungs gave out. But a cold, crystalline fury stopped me. I realized that if I walked in there with the burner phone now, she would have the upper hand. She would cry, she would apologize, she would tell me it was just a mistake or just a flirtation that got out of hand. She would use that practiced melodic voice to gaslight me one last time, and I would be left wondering if I was the monster for checking her car. I knew better now. I had seen room 304 in the messages. I had seen the red set. I had heard her call our life a gray world. I didn't want an apology. I wanted the truth to be undeniable. I carefully slid the burner phone back under the passenger seat, ensuring it was angled exactly as I'd found it, so a casual glance wouldn't reveal it had been moved. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, and my skin looked gray, but I forced my facial muscles into a mask of predictable contentment. I walked into the house. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary hit me the moment I crossed the threshold, the universal scent of a happy, domestic evening. Sonia was at the stove, her back to me, humming a song I now recognized from the video I'd just watched. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice light and musical, not even turning around. "You're late. Did you have trouble moving the car?" I felt a surge of genuine terror at how easily she lied. It wasn't just a cover-up, it was a performance. "Just a bit of a struggle with the seat adjustment," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from a different room. She turned around and smiled at me, the same predatory, confident smile I'd seen in her hotel bathroom selfies, and kissed my cheek. Her lips felt like ice. Her touch felt like a violation of my very soul. That dinner was the longest 60 minutes of my life. I sat across from her, chewing food that tasted like wet ash, watching her lips move as she told me about her exhausting day at the marketing firm. She described meetings that never happened and client phone calls that were actually sessions with Marcus. I watched her check her official phone on the table, her thumbs flying as she sent a text. My own phone remained silent. I knew who she was really talking to. I knew that she was probably telling him I was boring her right now. I looked at the woman I had shared a bed with for 3,000 nights, and I realized I didn't know her at all. I was married to an actress who had been playing the role of wife while her real life happened in the shadows of room 304. I realized then that betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it turns your home into a prison where you are the only one who knows the walls are made of glass. The next morning, I did something I never thought I was capable of. I waited until I heard the shower running, then I crept out to the garage at 6 a.m. and planted a small GPS tracker deep in the lining of Sonia's trunk. It was a device I'd bought for my mountain bike months ago, never realizing its real purpose would be to track the slow death of my marriage. When she came downstairs, she was glowing. She wore a new silk blouse and spent an extra 10 minutes on a makeup. "Big presentation today," she said, avoiding my eyes as she grabbed her keys. "I might be late again. Don't wait up for dinner, babe." I nodded, the predictable husband, and kissed her forehead. I felt like I was kissing a tombstone. I gave her a 10-minute head start, then I opened the app on my phone. The little red dot began to move. She wasn't heading toward the city center. She wasn't heading toward the marketing firm. She was heading north, toward the interstate, toward the same mid-range hotel I'd seen in the burner phone's messages. I followed her, staying 4 or 5 cars back, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white and my palms bled. Every mile I covered felt like I was peeling back a layer of my own skin. I watched her turn into the parking lot of the Summit Inn,
a place that looked exactly as anonymous and drab as the life she claimed we had. I parked across the street behind a row of service vans and waited, the engine idling, the heater blowing dry air into my face. 5 minutes later, the silver sedan pulled in. Marcus. He didn't look like a villain. He looked like a man meeting a friend for lunch. He got out of his car and leaned against the hood, checking his watch. When Sonia stepped out of her SUV, the transformation was complete. She didn't look tired or stressed like she did at our dinner table. She looked alive. She ran to him, and they embraced in the middle of the parking lot, a long, lingering hug that defied every "I love you" she had ever whispered to me. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, familiar kiss that claimed her. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sensation of my ribs being crushed. I took a photo through the windshield, the shutter sound of the camera feeling like a hammer blow. I didn't wait to see them walk into the lobby. I didn't need to see the elevator stop at the 3rd floor. I turned my car around and drove to a lawyer's office, finally understanding that the gray world wasn't our marriage. It was the lie she had forced me to live in.
While Sonia and Marcus were entrenched in the temporary sanctuary of room 304, I was sitting in a place that felt like the polar opposite of a cheap hotel. I was on the 34th floor of a steel and glass skyscraper downtown, sitting in the office of Elias Thorne. Elias was a man who didn't deal in emotions. He dealt in the cold, hard geometry of a failing marriage. He was older, with silver hair cropped close to his skull, and a voice that sounded like dry parchment. He didn't offer me coffee, and he didn't tell me he was sorry for what I was going through. He simply opened a leather-bound folder and looked at me over the rim of his spectacles. "My job, Stephen, is to make sure your heart doesn't bankrupt your future," Elias said. "You've brought me the phone logs and the GPS data. Now let's look at the blood work." He turned his computer screen toward me, and for the next hour we performed a financial autopsy. Elias had already run a preliminary check on our joint accounts, and what we found was a systematic pillaging of our lives. For 7 months, Sonia had been funneling money out of our Italy fund and our nursery savings. It wasn't just a few $100s here and there, it was thousands. She had opened a secret credit card in her own name, using our home equity as a silent guarantee, a move Elias called financial fraud in the first degree. Every client dinner she'd put on her expense report was a meal I had paid for. Every red set of lingerie, every vintage bottle of wine, and every midday hotel booking had been funded by the very life I had worked double shifts to provide. I sat there, looking at the bank statements, realizing that she hadn't just stolen my heart, she had been systematically robbing our future. She had treated our joint savings like a slush fund for her affair. The next year we always talked about, the kids, the travel, the stability, it was never going to happen because she had already spent it on Marcus. I saw a charge for a jeweler from 3 weeks ago, $2,000. I remembered that day. She told me she'd spent the afternoon at a spa to relax her nerves. In reality, she was buying a gift for a man who was helping me destroy me. Elias leaned back, tapping his pen against the oak desk. "She's been very thorough, Stephen. She wasn't just having an affair, she was preparing for a transition. She's been searching for asset protection and alimony calculators on your home computer. She's waiting for the right moment to leave you with nothing." I looked at Elias Thorne, this man who saw marriages as mere balance sheets, and I realized I needed his coldness. I needed his lack of empathy. "I don't want a settlement, Elias," I said, my voice finally steady. "I want a war." Elias didn't smile, but a sharp light entered his eyes. "A war is expensive, Stephen, but a betrayal is costlier.
We'll start by filing the emergency freeze on the assets. By the time she realizes you know, she won't even be able to buy a cup of coffee with your money." I left his office that day feeling like a different person. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a client, and Elias Thorne was the architect of my retaliation.
For 3 days after the meeting with my lawyer, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I was a ghost haunting my own hallways, moving through a life that felt like a movie set, where the props were real, but the actors were hollow. I watched Sonia with a detached, clinical intensity. I watched her brush her hair. I watched her hum while she made coffee, and I watched the way she guarded her purse. I didn't take the burner phone again immediately. I needed her to feel safe. I needed her to believe that her predictable husband was still sound asleep at the wheel of his own life. The opportunity finally presented itself on a Thursday. Sonia announced she had a mandatory regional seminar in a city 2 hours away. She claimed she'd be in back-to-back presentations from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. It was the perfect lie. It gave her a reason to be offline to me while she was actually with Marcus. But I knew their pattern. My GPS tracker showed her car wasn't at a hotel. It was at a secluded cabin rental near the lake. The night before she left, while she was dead to the world, I had crept out to the garage and taken the actual burner phone from under her seat. I didn't need to spoof a number. I had the weapon itself. I spent that night reading every new message. That's when I saw it. They had a Find My Friend style app shared between their 2 burner phones so they could coordinate their arrivals without texting. I sat at our dining room table at 3 p.m., watching the screen of the burner. I saw 2 dots at the lake cabin. Then at 3:15 p.m., Marcus's dot started to move. He was heading south, back toward the city, likely heading home to his own wife before her workday ended. Sonia's dot remained stationary at the cabin. She was likely napping or showering, enjoying the afterglow of her betrayal. The distance between them was my greatest ally. I took the burner phone, her phone, and I typed the bait to Marcus, knowing he was alone in his car and couldn't verify the message with her. "I'm heading home now. Steven just called. He's been pulled into an emergency double shift at the data center. He won't be back until tomorrow morning. I don't want to be alone tonight. I'm leaving the cabin early. Come to the house at 4:30. Use the back door through the woods so the neighbors don't see. I'll have the wine ready. I need you." I hit send. I knew Marcus's ego. He was already riding the high of their afternoon. The prospect of a night in my house, in my bed, while I was slaving away to pay for the very roof over his head, would be irresistible. I silenced the burner phone and tucked it into my pocket. I moved my car 2 streets over and walked back through the woods, entering my own home like a thief. I sat in the dark dining room, my own phone ready to record. I was no longer a husband. I was a trap. The back door opened at exactly 4:35 p.m. The creak of the hinges sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. I heard his boots on the linoleum of the mudroom, a heavy, arrogant stride. He was whistling. He walked through the kitchen, and I heard the sound of him setting something down on the counter, a bottle of wine. He was so certain of his welcome that he didn't even pause to look around. When he stepped into the dining room, he was already unbuttoning the top of his shirt. "Sonia? Babe? I made record jime. The traffic on the—" He stopped. The word interstate died in his throat. The light from the window caught the side of my face as I turned slowly in the oak chair to look at him. The transformation in Marcus was instantaneous. The arrogance drained out of his posture as if someone had pulled a plug. I looked at him, and my mind flashed back to our backyard last July. I remembered the smell of the charcoal, the sound of the neighbors laughing, and Marcus standing right there by the grill. He was a co-worker of Sonia's, a guy I had barely known, yet he had been invited into our sanctuary. I remembered shaking his hand. His grip was firm, practiced. I remembered him looking me dead in the eye, a cold beer in his hand, and telling me, "Stephen, you're a lucky man. You've got the best woman in the world here." I had thanked him. I had smiled. I had felt a sense of pride. Now, looking at him cowering in my dining room, I realized that even then he was laughing at me. "I remember that barbecue, Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady. "I remember you looking me in the eye. I remember you telling me how lucky I was. Were you thinking about room 304 back then, too? Or was that just the warm-up for the lie?" Marcus didn't sit at first. He took a step back. "Stephen, look, this is a misunderstanding. I was just coming over to help her with a marketing project." I didn't blink. I picked up the folder and slid the photo of them kissing in the hotel parking lot across the table. "Does your marketing project usually involve my nursery fund? Does it usually involve $5,000 of my savings being spent on jewelry and vintage wine?" I leaned forward. "I've seen the videos, Marcus. I've heard her voice. You have two choices. You can sit in that chair and tell me exactly how long this has been going on, or I can call your wife, Sarah, right now. I have her number pulled up on my phone. Which is it?" The mention of his wife broke him. He collapsed into the chair, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. For the next 90 minutes, I sat in the silence of my dying marriage and listened to a man I'd shared a burger with explain how he had helped dismantle my life. He didn't defend Sonia. He didn't talk about their soul connection. He blamed her. He said she was the one who pushed for the burner phone. He said she was the one who suggested using our house when I was away. He spoke about her with a casual disrespect that made me realize Sonia had traded her entire life for a man who didn't even like her. I recorded every word on my phone, watching the minutes tick by. I was waiting for the final act. I was waiting for the sound of Sonia's SUV in the driveway.
The sound of the garage door opening felt like the beginning of a storm. Marcus jolted in his seat, his head snapping toward the hallway. "She's here," he whispered, terror written across his face. "Stephen, please, don't tell her I told you everything. Please." "Stay in the chair, Marcus," I said. It wasn't a request. I heard the door from the garage open. I heard the sound of her heels on the hardwood, a sharp, rhythmic tapping. "Babe, you home? I got back as fast as I could," she called out. She had clearly rushed back from the lake, seeing the text on the burner and thinking she had the house to herself. She walked into the dining room, her face flushed from the drive, a smile on her lips that froze the moment she saw me sitting at the head of the table. The bag of groceries she was carrying hit the floor. A carton of eggs broke, the yellow yolk spreading across the hardwood like a slow-motion disaster. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. She looked at Marcus, then she looked at me. Her eyes dropped to the table, where the burner phone sat next to the divorce papers and the photos. She didn't try to deny it. "Stephen," she said, her voice trembling, I can explain." "Explain what, Sonia?
Explain the handshake from the barbecue. Explain why you let this man into our home so he could look me in the eye and lie to me. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the oak floor. Explain why you told Marcus I was sad and predictable. Or maybe you can explain why you've been draining our nursery fund. I walked toward her. He told me everything, Sonia, I said, gesturing to Marcus. He told me it was all your idea. He told me he was trying to end it, but you wouldn't let him go. Is that the real life you were talking about in the video? A man who would throw you under the bus the second things got uncomfortable. Sonia spun around to look at Marcus, her eyes wide with shock. What? Marcus, you didn't... Marcus wouldn't look up. He was already reaching for his keys. I have to go, Sonia. This was a mistake. He stood up and bolted for the back door, leaving her standing in the wreckage of the life she had dismantled. I looked at my wife, the woman I had loved for a decade, and I felt nothing but a deep, hollow exhaustion. The locks will be changed by tomorrow morning, Sonia. Your things are already in your car. I've transferred your half of the remaining money, minus what you stole, into a separate account. Don't call me. The only person you'll be speaking to from now on is my attorney. I walked out of the room, leaving her standing among the broken eggs and the ruins of her deception. I didn't look back. As I drove away, I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. The gray world was finally behind me.
The morning after the confrontation, the silence in the house was no longer heavy with secrets. It was sterile, like a hospital room after a successful surgery. I sat at the oak dining room table, the broken eggshells cleared away, and watched the sunrise hit the grain of the wood. At precisely 8:30 a.m., I dialed the direct line for Elias Thorne. "It's done," I said. My voice was a ghost of its former self, hollow but firm. "Good," Elias responded. I could hear the rustle of papers on his end, the sound of a man ready to move a mountain. The emergency order for sequential asset protection was filed electronically 5 minutes ago. I've already sent the notice to the banks. By the time Sonia tries to buy breakfast, she'll find that the Italy fund and every joint credit line have been cauterized. Elias Thorne didn't believe in half measures. He explained that because we had pre-documented the dissipation of marital assets, the jewelry, the hotels, the secret dinners, the law viewed Sonia's spending as a form of theft against our shared estate. I sat there as he walked me through the numbers. Every dollar she had spent on Marcus was being credited back to my side of the ledger. "She didn't just lose a husband last night, Stephen," Elias said with a cold, professional satisfaction. "She lost her liquidity. In the eyes of the court, she has already pre-spent her portion of the home equity on her lover." I spent the rest of the morning watching the digital ripples of his work. My phone pinged with alerts: joint savings account, access restricted, primary credit line, card deactivated. I imagined Sonia at a gas station or a motel, staring at a declined screen, her face turning that same sickly white I'd seen in the dining room. She had mocked my predictability, but she was about to learn that the most predictable thing in the world is the consequence of breaking a contract.
By noon, the legal net was secure. Now it was time to address the professional world Sonia and Marcus so dearly loved. I opened the dossier I had prepared weeks ago, the one Elias had vetted. This wasn't about revenge, it was about the misuse of company resources. I drafted a formal email to the chief compliance officer and the head of HR at their marketing firm. I didn't use the word affair. I used words like fraud, expense manipulation, and conduct unbecoming. I attached the GPS logs that proved Sonia's company car was at a lake cabin during hours she had billed to a regional seminar. I included the scanned receipts from Marcus's creative brainstorming dinners, meals I knew were shared with my wife. The weight of the send button felt like lead. I pressed it at 1:15 p.m. Then I waited. At 3:30 p.m., my phone vibrated. It was a text from Jen, a current colleague and friend of Sonia's. "Stephen? Oh my God, what is happening? Security just walked Marcus out with a cardboard box. He looked like he was about to faint. 10 minutes later, they took Sonia into the executive suite. The blinds are drawn, Stephen. The whole floor is silent. Word is they found financial irregularities in their travel logs. They're clearing her desk right now, Stephen. They even took her laptop. Did you know?" I sat in the sun, feeling a deep, chilling sense of irony. Sonia had called our life a gray world because it lacked drama. Now she was the star of a tragedy. She had traded a 10-year career for a few afternoons in room 304. I hadn't destroyed her. I had simply stopped maintaining the lie that she was an honest person.
The sun was beginning to set. There was one final bridge to burn. Marcus had bolted out of my house like a dog with its tail between its legs, but I knew he would go home to his wife, Sarah, and weave a tapestry of lies. He would say he was tempted but stopped it, or claim I was a jealous lunatic. I took the burner phone and I dialed Sarah's number. I remembered her from the barbecue last July. I remembered her laughing at Marcus's jokes, her hand resting on his arm. "Sarah," I said when she answered. "It's Stephen, Sonia's husband." The silence that followed was brittle. "Stephen, is everything okay? Marcus said there was an emergency. He hasn't come home yet." "Sarah, please listen to me carefully," I said. "He isn't at the office. He was fired today for an affair with my wife. I have sent a link to your email. It contains the hotel receipts, the GPS logs, and the recordings of Marcus in my dining room today, admitting that he never intended to leave you, not for love, but for the comfort of your salary." I stayed on the line as she opened the file. I heard the sharp, ragged intake of breath. I heard a muffled sob. "He told me he wanted to try for a baby this winter," she whispered. Her voice was a ghost. "He kissed me this morning and told me I was the only thing that kept him grounded." "He told me I was a lucky man while he was standing in my backyard," I replied. We didn't need to say more. I heard a car pull into her driveway. Marcus was home. I heard her phone hit the floor, and I heard Marcus's cheerful voice call out, "Hey, honey, you won't believe the day I had," before the call ended. I had dismantled a factory of lies.
A year has passed since the night the eggs broke on the hardwood floor, the yellow yolks staining the wood like a mark of shame that I eventually had to sand away myself, kneeling on the floor for hours until my back ached and the wood was raw and clean again. The divorce was not the quick, cinematic break I had imagined. It was a long, cold, and surgical process that felt more like an estate liquidation than the end of a romance. Because I had Elias Thorne in my corner, the financial infidelity clauses we had prepared months in advance held firm like a reinforced levee against a flood. Elias was a shark in the courtroom, a man who spoke in the language of ledgers and statutes. He didn't care about Sonia's tears or her claims that I was stifling her with my predictable nature. He systematically proved that every cent she had funneled from the nursery fund and the Italy savings was a direct breach of our marital contract.
He presented the receipts from the Summit Inn and the jewelry store not as evidence of a broken heart, but as evidence of theft. He showed the court that while I was building a future, she was dismantling it for parts. By the time the judge signed the final decree, the math was devastating for her. I kept the house, the physical shell of our decade together, now purged of her presence. I kept the majority of the retirement accounts, protected by the evidence of her dissipation of our shared assets. Sonia walked away with a 10-year-old used car, a few suitcases of clothes, and a mountain of legal fees she would be paying off for the next 20 years. The safety net she had mocked for being too gray was gone, and for the first time in her life, she was falling without a parachute. I heard through Jen, who eventually stopped being friends with Sonia after the full truth of the expense fraud and the corporate investigation came out, that Sonia and Marcus tried to make it work for a few weeks. The soulmates were finally free to be together, no longer hiding in cabins or shadows. It was a spectacular disaster. Without the thrill of the secret, without the adrenaline of the lie, and with both of them unemployed and socially exiled, they turned on each other within a month. The soul connection couldn't pay the rent, and the real life they craved turned out to be a cold, bitter struggle for survival in a world that no longer respected them. Marcus eventually crawled back to his parents' basement after Sarah won a massive settlement in their own divorce, leaving him with nothing but his ego and a box of old office supplies. But for Sonia, the karma was more personal. The woman who defined herself by her marketing genius and her vibrant social standing found herself toxic. In our industry, trust is the only real currency, and hers was bankrupt. She spent months applying for executive roles, only to have HR departments find the termination for cause on her record. Now, I'm told she's working a low-level retail job 2 towns over, folding sweaters for teenagers who have no idea she once commanded 6-figure budgets. She lives in a cramped studio apartment that smells like stale cigarettes and regret, a far cry from the lake cabins and the high-rise offices she thought she deserved. There are no more vintage wines or jewelry gifts. There is only the fluorescent hum of a retail floor and the long walk back to a lonely room. She traded a life of dignity for a few months of excitement, and the trade-off has left her bankrupt in every sense of the word. As for me, I learned that predictable isn't a slur, it's a foundation. It's the sound of a key in a lock that actually belongs to the person turning it. I live in a house that is quiet, but it is no longer a tomb. I spent months repainting every room, stripping away the colors she chose, replacing the vibrant accents with tones that actually bring me peace. I started seeing someone new, a woman named Claire who works in a quiet library and finds joy in the same gray things I do. A long walk at dusk, a slow, honest meal, and a truth that doesn't need to be hidden under a car seat. With Claire, there are no red sets or secret folders. There is just the steady, rhythmic pulse of a life built on trust. Sometimes, when I'm cleaning the SUV, my hand still brushes the carpet under the passenger seat. My fingers hover over the spot where I first felt that cold black glass, the burner phone that acted as the detonator for my entire world. But I don't flinch anymore. I don't feel the bile rise in my throat. I just pull my hand back and realize that finding that phone wasn't the end of my life. It was the moment I stopped being a character in someone else's messy, dishonest play and started being the architect of my own. I look out at the yard, at the spot near the grill where Marcus once stood, shook my hand, and lied to my face. I realize the air has never tasted sweeter than it does right now.
The gray world didn't win. The honest world did. I am alone in the memories, but for the first time in my life, I am finally home.
The story of Stephen, Sonia, and Marcus isn't just a tale of betrayal. It's a study in the power of the unseen. For 7 months, a secret world existed beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect life. A world of burner phones, hidden cabins, and stolen dreams. But as the dust settles, we see that the truth has a weight all its own. Betrayal often feels like a house fire. It consumes everything you thought was solid. Yet, as Stephen discovered, once the fire burns out, you are left with the foundation. For some, that foundation is gray and predictable, but for those who have lived through a lie, those words become synonyms for peace. Sonia and Marcus chased a vibrant life, believing that excitement was worth more than integrity. In the end, they found that a life built on shadows cannot survive the light of day. They traded a lifetime of security for a few moments of adrenaline, leaving them with nothing but the echoes of what they once were. Stephen didn't just win a legal battle, he won back the right to his own reality. He stopped being a victim of a secret and became the architect of his own truth. The gray world didn't win because it was dull, it won because it was real. If this story hit home for you, or if you've ever had to rebuild from the ashes of a lie, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your perspective. How would you have handled that final confrontation? If you found value in this journey today, make sure to hit that like button and share this video. It helps the channel grow and ensures these stories reach those who need to hear them most. And for more deep dives into the secrets people keep and the consequences that follow, make sure to subscribe to Echoes of Trust and Betrayal and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a chapter. Thank you for watching and for standing with the truth. We'll see you in the next one.